It is quite possibly the biggest and best week ahead for Big Ten men's basketball this conference has known in some time, or maybe all time, as we welcome you to the midweek check-in show here on Big Ten Breakdown. I am Ben Stevens. Of course, all of this a part of the I-80 Club. Make sure you are liking, following, and subscribing wherever you get your favorite shows in audio podcast format, the podcast feeds, Apple, Spotify, etc. I hope you are watching on YouTube and, of course, following on all of the socials as well. And if you want all the great content and coverage the I-80 Club is producing and delivering on a daily basis, you can get that advertisement free. Patreon.com/I80 Club. That is Patreon.com/I80 Club. It is your midweek check-in show here on Big Ten Breakdown. And what a week ahead. What a week in store for Big Ten basketball. We'll talk about it later, but let's not bury the lead. We have 3 top 10 tilts in this conference over the next 6 days, starting on this Tuesday evening as the Nebraska Cornhuskers continue to make history in hoops basically every time they take the floor. We'll look back on the weekend that was here on the midweek check-in show, the biggest weekend, the biggest storyline, and the other biggest feats from the weekend that we saw, and of course set the stage for the week ahead. That's Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday in the Big Ten Conference before we get back underway on Friday for your weekend pregame show. Let's start here on the midweek check-in with the biggest weekend in the Big Ten Conference, and that belongs to the freshman from Shawnee, Kansas, who currently plays his basketball in Champaign, Keaton Wagler. A 46-point performance at Purdue inside Mackey Arena that will live in the history books of college basketball as perhaps one of the most dazzling scoring performances this sport has ever seen, given the circumstance, given the significance of a matchup, a top 15 tilt against the Boilermakers, and perhaps the best scoring and offensive performance a freshman will ever put forth here in the Big Ten. Keaton Wagler scores 46 points in an 88-82 win for the Illini over the Boilermakers in West Lafayette on Saturday afternoon. It was against number 4 Purdue, but the Boilers have dropped now 2 straight. They rank 12th in the AP top 25. Illinois up and in from 11 inside the top 10, now number 9 in country. Again, this is one of the best scoring performances that college basketball has ever known in the history of this sport. And that's not overly dramatic in terms of stating such a case. The 46 points scored by Keaton Wagler, the most points scored against an AP top 10 foe in the AP poll era in men's college hoops. That dates back to the 1948-49 season. 46 points for Keaton Wagler on the road. He was 13 of 17 from the floor. He was 9 from 11. That's an Illinois record from 3 in this game. 46 points on only 17 field goal tries. That is the embodiment and perhaps definition of efficiency. The 46 points, again, the most ever in a road win against an AP top 10 team in the history of the AP poll era, which dates back to 1948-49. Keaton Wagler is the first ever player in Division I men's college basketball history to score 40 or more points in a road win against an AP top 5 team in the history of this sport since at least 1948-49. His 9 3-pointers made, again, an Illinois program record. He set an Illinois freshman record, dropping 46 points, that tying for the second most points ever scored by an Illini player in program history. He set a Mackey Arena record for the most points scored by an opposing player against Purdue. And not only was it 46 points on just 17 field goals, making 13, 9 of them from beyond that 3-point arc, it was a critical Big Ten victory for Illinois. Now, winners of 9 straight, continuing to be dominant on the road as they have been the last half decade plus under Brad Underwood. And they get a victory over a Purdue team, 88-82, winning by 6, in what we knew would be an offensive affair between the 2 best offenses in this sport currently in college basketball, with making some keen critical defensive stops without maybe their best on-ball defender in Kylan Boswell playing in this game. And not only just the 46 points out of Keaton Wagler, but they do so in a game that Purdue shot 57% from the field and only had 3 turnovers. The biggest weekend in the Big Ten, goes to one of the best scoring performances this league and this sport has ever known. Keaton Wagler dropping 46 points on the road in West Lafayette inside one of the most vaunted venues in this sport, that being Mackey Arena against Purdue. Huge victory for Illinois, now number 9 in the country. Biggest weekend, Keaton Wagler. Biggest storyline continues to be Nebraska. The Huskers just keep winning. Now 20-0 after a 76-57 19-point win against Minnesota. This was a Nebraska team trailing by 6 points at the break, outscored the Gophers by 25 in those final 20 minutes. They released the cinematic recap of Nebraska's victory in the Twin Cities on Saturday with Fred Hoiberg potentially as animated as you will ever see him in that halftime locker room speech, trying to build up some optimism for this team again. And Nebraska rallied. Now 20-0, third consecutive 20-win season for Nebraska. That's the first time ever Nebraska has won at least 20 games in men's basketball history in 3 straight years. Nebraska also not just 20-0 this year, 24 consecutive victories for the Cornhuskers, that matching the longest win streak by a Big Ten team since Ohio State started the 2010-11 season, a perfect 24-0. 5 road wins in a row in conference play for the Huskers as well. That the most for the program since February of 1966. Nebraska continues to rewrite and perhaps set its own record book for what they are doing performance in, performance out this season in Lincoln, Nebraska. And part of that enthusiasm in the second half was not just Fred Hoiberg firing up his team. We knew the depth and the lack thereof, not having Braden Frager in the game in Minneapolis would be a cause of concern for Nebraska. It was Price Sanford as well. Only 2 points on only 2 field goal tries in the first half. He finished with 22 points and 10 boards, his 4th consecutive 20-point game against a Big Ten foe. Nebraska just keeps winning. Nebraska is 20-0, and a monumental stretch for the Cornhuskers begin on this Tuesday night, as we'll share in just a matter of minutes. Biggest weekend, Keaton Wagler's 46 points on the road in Mackey. The biggest storyline continues to be one of the 3 remaining undefeated D1 men's college basketball teams this season. The Nebraska Cornhuskers now perfect, unblemished at 20-0. Some of the other biggest stories from the weekend that was also in that noon Eastern spot on Saturday. Michigan State just absolutely dismantling Maryland for all the reasons we know Michigan State is a top 10 team in college basketball this year. It starts defensively, holding the Terps to only 48, a 91-48 win, a 43-point margin of victory for Tom Izzo and company, their second most in a Big Ten game ever, only trailing an output against Michigan in March of 2000. And in that game, not just the defense being great, but the point guard in East Lansing being sensational and historic. Jeremy Fears Jr. against Maryland, 17 points, 17 assists, the 3rd most ever in a conference game in Big Ten history, the 3rd most ever in a performance for anybody wearing a Michigan State jersey. Mateen Cleaves set the record for both, 20 in that big win against Michigan back in March of 2000. Second 40-plus point win for Michigan State ever against a Big Ten team in program history as well. Michigan State basketball continues to impress with the most efficient and most elite defense in the sport. Elsewhere on Friday night, Michigan gets a victory against Ohio State, tightly contested. Buckeyes even had a 6-point lead early in the second half, and then Yaxel Lendeborg and everybody else pulling away inside the Chrysler Center. Indiana got a much-needed win, stymieing a 4-game losing skid. They had 3 players scoring at least 20 points. Lamar Wilkerson had 27. Nick Dorn, the Elon transfer, starting to light it up. He had 23. 6 made 3-pointers in that game. And Tucker DeVries, 22 points and 10 boards. 23-point road win for the Hoosiers in Piscataway against Rutgers. The first time a trio of IU players scored at least 20 points in a single game since 2021. So that's what we had from the weekend that was. But on the midweek check-in show, because we have Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, before we get to your weekend pregame show and everything we will have over those 3 days, we got to get to the games that we are about to see. Often we run through them quickly. Here's a fact you need to know, something to make you a little bit of a smarter Big Ten fan so you can consume all of that action with our triple headers on Wednesday now becoming a staple of Big Ten Conference men's basketball. We got to give you something. But this week is unlike any other that we have seen so far in this college hoop season. This week in the Big Ten Conference is perhaps the finest and best week Big Ten men's basketball has ever seen. As I mentioned at the very start of the midweek check-in show, we have 3 top 10 matchups this week in Big Ten men's basketball. Starting tonight, a top 5 tilt between Nebraska and Michigan in Ann Arbor inside the Chrysler Center. 3 top 10 tilts in the same week has not happened very often in the history of Big Ten men's hoops. In fact, it is the first time we have had 3 top 10 games in the same week over a 7-day or even 6-day span since February 28th through March 6th of the year 2021. By my research, as far back as I can go in sports reference, using StatHead and trying to find all this data, this sample size, this information, 3 top 10 tilts in the same week, a 6 or 7-day sample size, has only happened twice, that week in late 2021 and this week here. Just twice in the history of Big Ten men's basketball, in at least the last 2.5 decades, we have had 3 top 10 games in the same week, February 28th through March 6th of 2021, and now January 27th through February 1st of 2026. So relish this week. Indulge in this week of Big Ten basketball. Let's set the stage. We've got 4 teams in the Big Ten inside the top 10, led by number 3 Michigan, then number 5 Nebraska, the first team in the state of Nebraska at a D1 level to be an AP top 5 team in the history of men's hoops in the great state of Nebraska. Of course, the Huskers last week ranking 7th in the AP poll. That was a program record for the first time ever in Nebraska ball history. The Cornhuskers are a top 5 team in the country. Michigan State is now 7th in the AP top 25. Illinois is number 9. Purdue, dropping 2 straight, falls to number 12 in the country. But in Joe Lunardi's most recent bracketology that came out to start this week on a Monday, the Big Ten had 5 of the top 10 national seeds, including a 1 seed in Michigan, 3 of the 4 2 seeds, Nebraska, Illinois, Michigan State, and Purdue was on that 3 line as the 10th overall national seed. This conference this year, the Big 12 might have a little bit more depth. Maybe the SEC has more teams that enter the NCAA tournament. But this feels like the first year in a long time there are multiple teams legitimately within this Big Ten conference that, based on the metrics, based on the history, based on the track record, can contend for a national championship, something the Big Ten has not seen now in 25 years. This year feels like that year. Again, as we shared, the biggest week of Big Ten basketball in a very, very long time. So let's dive into the first of those 3 top 10 tilts that we have this week. 2 of those 3 involving Nebraska, 2 of those 3 matchups involving Michigan, and that's how it gets started. Tonight in A2 inside the Chrysler Center, it is number 5 Nebraska, it is number 3 Michigan. Again, 3 top 10 tilts this week in the history of Nebraska ball. This will be the second top 10 matchup the Huskers have ever played in. It is the first ever top 5 tilt Nebraska will ever face off in. That first top 10 game was way back in 1996, Nebraska and Kansas. So the first time in nearly 60 years. Actually, in fact, 60 exact years. It is just the 12th ever top 25 matchup Nebraska will ever play in. And it happens on this Tuesday evening, 7 p.m. Eastern time on Peacock, or perhaps you have YouTube TV. I hope you do. And the NBC Sports Network, 7 p.m. Eastern time tip. A lot was made about a top 5 game, more than likely featuring a double-digit spread in favor of the Maize and Blue. Is it the odds makers overlooking the Huskers, not believing this 20-0 start? Perhaps. Is it Michigan still metrically being the best team in the country or the second best team in the country, only behind Arizona, who absolutely hammered West Virginia over the weekend to goose those numbers? Perhaps. Is it going to be very difficult for the Huskers to go on the road inside the Chrysler Center and stay undefeated against this Michigan team? Yes, it is very much going to be. Let's start with the injury news. Braden Frager, of course, suffering an ankle sprain, but not nearly as severe as it looked just under a week ago against the Huskies. Because of that, he is listed as a game-time decision for this matchup against the Wolverines. The key for Nebraska to keep pace in this game is going to be the three-point shot. 51% of the field goal tries for Fred Hoiberg and his Huskers from beyond that three-point line this year. Michigan is very difficult with all of its length and athleticism to score on inside the three-point line, so they allow nearly 43% of opponent shots this year to come from three-point range. That's not just because all of these are great looks and you can attack and get lethal against Michigan from deep. Not necessarily. They make it very difficult as the best two-point field goal percentage defense in the sport to find easy looks or clean looks near the bucket. Part of that forces the opposition beyond the three-point line. But can the Huskers use the three-point shot to be the great equalizer tonight inside the Chrysler Center? Michigan only has one loss this year. It happened in Ann Arbor against Wisconsin now nearly 3 weeks ago. In that game, the Badgers, who also take nearly 51% of their field goal tries from three-point range, very much like Nebraska, was 15 of 33 from three. That is better than 45%, and 33 three-point tries for Wisconsin in the upset over Michigan to only 25 from two-point range. That's going to be key for the Huskers. How about the other side for Dusty May in the maize and blue? Michigan is the 11th fastest team in the country. They are the fastest team in the Big Ten. Nebraska has played one other team that ranks top 20 in the country in terms of tempo. It was the closest game for the Huskers this year, the 1-point win in the non-con against Kansas State. Can Michigan, with its length, with its athleticism, just outpace a Nebraska team that if they do not have Braden Frager, more than likely looking at a seven-man rotation? And as Fred Hoiberg said, in getting ready for this game with a top 5 ranking next to his name, that's all well and good. You got to go out there and earn it. And to beat this Michigan team, you have to be damn near perfect. That's what it will take for Nebraska on this Tuesday to improve to 21-0 and stay undefeated. I'm not sure it happens, but I think even in a loss, if the Huskers can cover this double-digit spread, Nebraska can prove something, even further legitimizing this sensational and historic start that I think, again, even in defeat, can prove tonight. It's not just a remarkable story or a feel-good story or one of the best turnarounds in the history of college basketball. Nebraska is a legitimate national championship or perhaps Final Four contender. What a great game we have tonight in Ann Arbor. Michigan will play with pace. Michigan has the size advantage. 78.5 inches is their average height. That's top 30 in college basketball. The Huskers are a really good defensive rebounding team, though, so I'm not sure that's a huge advantage for the Wolverines against the Huskers, like it might be for others. Can Nebraska be dynamite from three? They're going to have to be that great equalizer to stay in this game. Michigan will give you those three-point looks because it's very hard to go inside against Adai Mara and Merez Johnson Jr. and the athleticism of Yaxel Lendeborg. Can Nebraska take advantage of it from beyond that three-point line? We also have another brilliant game on this Tuesday evening. Perhaps not a top 25 matchup, but it's still a rivalry. And in 49 other states, it's just basketball. In the state of Indiana, inside Assembly Hall on Tuesday night in Bloomington, it's going to mean everything. It's the final trip for Braden Smith, for Trey Kaufman-Renn, for Fletcher Lawyer and company as number 12 Purdue on a 2-game losing skid visits Indiana tonight inside Assembly Hall, 9 p.m. Eastern time, also on Peacock. The 222nd all-time meeting between the Hoosiers and the Boilermakers, the most and most frequently played rivalry series in the Big Ten Conference of the original Big Ten members, not including the West Coast teams. Washington and Oregon and USC, UCLA have played more frequently. Purdue has won 3 of the last 4 against IU, but IU has won 3 of the last 4 at home in Bloomington. Purdue will be ranked for a 10th consecutive time, taking on Indiana tonight, even if that ranking went from number 4 in the country to number 12. But the Boilermakers just 8-17 all time when they have a number next to their name inside Assembly Hall. Purdue has also lost 2 consecutive in 2 games on the road against UCLA in Westwood, at home against Illinois on Saturday afternoon. Purdue held a lead, 6-point lead against the Bruins, 5-point lead against the Illini at the final media timeout. So under 4 minutes remaining in regulation, doing things that you would think with a veteran-laden squad coached by Matt Painter they would not do. Cough up that opportunity, end up losing that basketball game. If Purdue were to lose tonight against Indiana in Bloomington, they've dropped 3 of the last 4, it would be the first time since 2013-14 and 2014-15, the Boilermakers have dropped 3 games in a season in back-to-back years. The first time in more than a decade, Purdue would have 2 consecutive seasons with a 3-game losing skid. They dropped 4 late in February last year, which was unheard of at the time for the Boilermakers. Now, I think one of the keys in this game is Purdue on the defensive end of the floor. We said in the top 15 tilt, it was our game of the week on the weekend pregame show here on Big Ten Breakdown. Who would be able to make more stops between Purdue and Illinois? Neither defense all that elite, and when you have the most efficient offenses in the country, you are going to get some points. Who would be able to make a couple of key defensive stops down the stretch? The Illini had the answer. Purdue is now the 30th most efficient defense in the sport. Last week at this time, top 20, number 19 in the nation. The Boilers don't really turn you over, which is interesting because they have Braden Smith, who is one of the all-time leaders in steals in the sport and in Big Ten basketball history. And again, a lot of length for a Purdue team. That's no surprise. They allow their opponents to shoot the 3 at more than 45% of the time. Darren DeVries in Indiana want to do just that. 51.2% of the field goal attempts for IU this year from 3. That is 9th most in college hoops. Can that be a great equalizer at home? Familiar sight lines, friendly environment for Indiana in the 222nd all-time meeting between the Hoosiers and the Boilermakers on this Tuesday night in Bloomington. Other critical games in the midweek before we get to the weekend pregame show. Really excited by this one tomorrow. Part of our 3 in the Big Ten Wednesday night triple header that has become a staple now of this conference. In Iowa City, inside Carver Hawkeye, it's USC and Iowa. 7 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow. USC, huge road win in Madison against Wisconsin by only 2, but by the 2 they needed on Sunday afternoon. Chad Baker-Mazara, 29 points, made 5 triples. USC got a huge road win. And Elijah Arenas, who played 29 minutes in his season debut, only played 18 here. He has struggled to find that offensive flow. Just 7 points against the Badgers, 3 of 12 from the floor. In his 2 games this year, 6 of 27 from the field, 0 of 9 from 3. But as he continues to work back, and as USC, now a 15-win team, might be able to continually stack some wins, this could be a Southern Cal team that right now is flirting with the NCAA tournament bubble that finds its way into a more safe and comfortable feeling come Selection Sunday in just about a month and a half. Now, Iowa enters this game against SC off for more than a week. The Hawkeyes have not played since a week ago today. Iowa, who has won 2 straight to get back to an even 500, 4-4 in Big Ten play, trying to get above 500. We have seen the Hawks at times, including that top 20 tilt at home against Illinois, struggle with some of that length. USC on average is the 4th tallest team in college basketball this year. How do Ben McCollum and company bring enough physicality to keep USC out of the paint, out of those second chance opportunities? USC is not really going to make you turn the basketball over. Iowa is one of the better transition teams in the country. When they want to get up and play with pace, they do not often play with that much tempo. I like Iowa in this spot tonight with an extended 8-day rest against the USC team that is on the road for a second game in the Midwest, but a critical game between the Hawks and the Trojans tomorrow night, on a Wednesday in Iowa City. The next game is in Madison, the border battle between Minnesota and Wisconsin, 9 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow. Wisconsin entered that game against USC, winners of 5 straight. They have been scoring lights out this year, 80 plus in more games already this season than basically any other year in program history for Wisconsin. In the last 4 of that 5-game win streak, entering Sunday in the Kohl Center against Southern Cal, Wisconsin was shooting at least 40% from 3. Against USC, 9 of 37. Again, not what the Badgers need. Only 71 points scored against USC as well. The fewest for Greg Gard and company since December 19th in more than a month against Villanova. Minnesota, meanwhile, has dropped 5 in a row. The first 4 losses in this now 5-game losing skid were pretty explainable by a point in OT at home against USC. The first meeting against the Badgers this year, the John Blackwell buzzer beater, losing by 10 on the road against Illinois. But that game was a 4-point game with under 4 minutes remaining, and then an overtime loss again on the road against Ohio State in Columbus last week. And they had a 6-point advantage on the undefeated Nebraska Cornhuskers at home on Saturday and got beat by 25 in the second half. 0 of 11 from 3, Nico Medved and Minnesota in that game against the Huskers in the second half. Can Minnesota start to rally? They're sub 500 this year. Again, it's a rivalry game. It's in the Kohl Center. Can Wisconsin bounce back? I believe the Badgers do tomorrow night. That's Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern time. Everything else before we get to the weekend. Michigan State visits Piscataway and Rutgers on Tuesday night. Tonight, 6:30 p.m. Eastern time, FS1. The Spartans are playing so well right now, and it starts on the defensive end of the floor. 6 consecutive wins for MSU, and all 6 of those victories, Michigan State has allowed 66 points or fewer to their opposition. They're the most efficient defense in the sport for a reason. They are putting that on display continuously. I do not think they will struggle in the rack tonight against Rutgers. Our final of 3 tomorrow in our Wednesday triple header, UCLA up the coast to the Pacific Northwest against Oregon, 11 p.m. Eastern time tip. UCLA has won 2 straight. UCLA has also won 4 of its last 5. They've got this game against an Oregon team that got beat by Washington over the weekend. No Jackson Shellstad, no Nate Biddle. It is going to be difficult for Dana Altman and company to win any games this year, to win more than maybe 2 in conference play. As we shared, Oregon very much in danger of its first losing season under Dana Altman, and now his 16th year at the helm. UCLA will be favored tomorrow. UCLA then returns home to Pauley for a 3-game homestand. They will be favored in all of those games. There is a really good chance as UCLA begins a road trip on Valentine's Day in the Mitten against Michigan and Michigan State on February 14th. UCLA is a 10-3 team within Big Ten play. Got to take care of business, but 4 very advantageous matchups, let's say, for the Bruins in the next few weeks. And then on Thursday, we've got a doubleheader. It starts in Evanston, Penn State and Northwestern. These 2 teams, 1-16 in Big Ten play as I record this, but with Penn State taking on Ohio State tonight in Columbus as this is recording. That's more than likely 1-17 in conference play between the Nittany Lions and the Wildcats. Northwestern has kept games at least competitive. I would expect them at home in Welsh Ryan to get a win against Penn State, who we're going to start to talk about Mike Rhodes and when Penn State might, if they ever do, get a victory in conference play. And then finally on Thursday, Washington and Illinois in Champaign. Huskies got a win they needed at home. Hannes Steinbach, Frank Kepnong, both with a double-double against Oregon. But it's difficult for Washington. It's going to be very difficult on the road in Champaign against this Illinois team that has been mightily impressive. 9 consecutive wins, everything they have done offensively, everything they can continue to do on the defensive side of the floor, even without Kylan Boswell, probably for the next few weeks. And again, Illinois on that 2 line, a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament, in much of the latest bracketology around this sport. How does Keaton Wagler back up one of the best scoring performances college basketball has ever known? 46 points at Purdue. We'll see, returning home to the State Farm Center on Thursday. That is everything that we have for you here on this midweek check-in. And not just a regular midweek check-in, a midweek check-in of history, a midweek slate in the Big Ten Conference that is as good as you will ever see, and perhaps as good as anybody will ever see. 3 top 10 tilts, the most in a single week in Big Ten men's basketball since February 28th through March 6th of 2021, which in the last 2 decades, that week and this week we have upcoming, is the most in the history of the conference in at least the last 25 years. So when we get to the weekend pregame show, it's those 2 other top 10 matchups that we have this week. In East Lansing, number 3 Michigan, number 7 Michigan State. That's going to be incredibly good. On Sunday in Lincoln, inside the vault, number 5 Nebraska, number 9 Illinois. It starts with a top 5 tilt for the first time ever in the history of Nebraska ball tonight in Ann Arbor on the road inside the Chrysler Center against Michigan. Number 5 Nebraska, number 3 Michigan. The Huskers, if they can win this one to improve to 21-0, I think that will tell you all you need to know about a Nebraska team that should be a 1 seed in the Big Dance. We'll see what the performance looks like tonight on the road in Ann Arbor. That does it for the midweek check-in show here on Big Ten Breakdown. I'm Ben Stevens, and as always, thanks for being here.